What's up guys, welcome back to FarmStrong. My name's Jack and thanks for joining me on the channel again. We're back with another Workshop Wednesday and I should apologise, it's a long overdue Workshop Wednesday, but I can explain why. But I've got the Alice Chalmers B engine block in front of me here, and today we're going to be getting the pistons unassembled, reassembled with cleaned down, reassembled with new rings and back in the block. If you haven't seen, there's a couple of videos prior to this one where we get the crank camshaft back in the engine and a couple of other things. So if you haven't seen those, go back and have a watch. In the meantime, off camera, I've also done a little bit of work to the front of the engine here. Got the water pump reassembled back on, crank pulley, fan and governor too. So I've done a little bit of work off camera just to get caught up. But basically we've been delayed because I had the wrong, I'd ordered the wrong piston rings for this engine. There's two sizes of engine and despite my careful measuring, I'd ordered the wrong rings. So I was waiting for the right size rings to come from the supplier, which I've now got. I've checked them, they do fit, so we are ready to go. So without any further delays, we'll crack on having a look at the pistons. So I thought I'd start with just a little bit of an explanation as to what's going to be going on for anyone that's not super familiar with the inside of an engine. But the Alice Chalmers B has a 4-cylinder engine, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 cylinders, and we're going to be dropping a piston back in, which looks like this, back down into the bore and connecting that back onto the crankshaft. So a cylinder is basically where you get the fuel air mixture, gets compressed, goes bang, and then turns the engine and obviously powers the tractor. The piston is made up of a few different components. We've got the actual piston, the connecting rod, an end cap to assemble it to the crankshaft with a couple of bearing shells inside there. And then the rings themselves, in the plastic here, I've got the new set, and then on the bench I've got the old set. So as you can see, we've got 4 different rings, a top ring, a middle ring, a scraper ring, and then the oil ring that's at the bottom. And in the old set, that is made up of I think 5 little skinny rings there. Those are all, well, I've removed them from, but those are all assembled into these grooves on the piston. They provide a seal against the cylinder wall so that the gases in the chamber don't escape. So what we're going to do is get these new rings assembled onto the piston. Once I've just done a bit of a cleaning job, you should be able to see there all that muck that's in the groove. So we need to clean out that muck before we can assemble the new rings, and then it will look something a little bit like this one here. So this is the piston for cylinder 1. This is one I've done earlier. So I've done that cleaning process and got the shiny new rings in the piston. So that one is ready to go back into cylinder 1. I'm going to get this one ready to go with you guys now, and then we'll have 2 pistons rather, to go back into the cylinders. To start with, trying to get these piston grooves cleaned up, I'm going to use an old broken piece of piston ring as a nice little scraper tool to get in each of the grooves to clean the main crud out. We'll then come back with some cleaning fluid and a brush to finish the job. I'm just giving the piston a general bit of tidy up with some red Scotch-Brite, just to shine it up and remove any other debris before we give it a rinse with some cleaning fluid and a blow off with the airline. After a quick blow off, we're looking pretty nice and clean. Now, in comparison, that's sort of the thing we were starting with. Obviously that's still got the rings in the grooves, but we're pretty nice and clean in there. so those rings can move freely, and then just a nice shine so that piston looks nice going back in. So to get our 4 new rings on to the piston, we've got this little set of piston ring pliers which basically help safely expand the ring to get it over the piston. And I've also got some assembly lube which I'm just going to get in the piston grooves so that when we first start this engine and there isn't oil all around the components, we won't be having a dry start. So I'm going to lap a little bit of oil around here with my fingers, and then we'll start putting the rings on. We'll put the bottom ring on first, the oil ring, and then the next ring, and obviously the final ring at the top. So a little bit of assembly lube. I'm just going to wipe in these grooves with my finger. Obviously I've got the piston just sitting in the vise here, so that it's in a nice orientation for me to do all this. I think some people are probably looking at the cleanliness of my work area to rebuild an engine and tutting, but hey, we're on a farm, not in a Formula 1 garage. So lubed up, ready to go. So the first ring is the oil ring. So this has got a little spring inside it, which I'm going to pop over first. And I should say it's all handily labelled on the new rings where I should be putting them. So the ring expander, I can just pop in, pull the pliers apart and slip that over the piston and leave it in the right groove. So bottom ring, third ring, and I'm just paying attention because these rings do say top on them. So top being obviously facing the sky. Second ring on. Third ring on. And then finally, top ring. I'm just bringing you in for a closer look. So our oil ring at the bottom, a couple of rings, and then our top ring. So this is where we can pull the rings apart to fit them over the pistons. And then when we put that back in the engine, we'll just make sure all of those end gaps are in a different orientation. So I've been a bit cheeky, off camera, piston number 1, the one I prepared earlier, I've just dropped that into number 1 cylinder just to check that was all going to go nice and easy. I'll now show you the process on piston number 2 so you can see what I did, and actually I'll just show you the engine spinning around as well, so you can see that piston moving up and down. It looks good and sounds good, so I'm happy with that. We'll leave it at top dead centre so the crankshaft's out the way for dropping the next one in. So before the piston is quite ready to go in, I've just put a little bit of assembly lube behind the bearing shell, so that'll help keep that in the right place as we put it all in. And then likewise I put a little bit of assembly lube on the bearing shell, so that's got some lubricant for the first start. I need to pay attention as there is an orientation for the piston connecting rod assembly to go into the engine. You can hopefully see on there that there's a long side on the connecting rod here and a short side here. So for pistons 2 and 4, this long side needs to face towards the front of the engine. Pistons 1 and 3, that long side will face towards the flywheel. So having got my orientation correct there, I'm just going to sit that piston on the top of the block, and I'll grab the little piston ring collar. Now what this tool's going to do is sit round the piston and squeeze all those rings up, and I can then knock the piston down through the collar and into the bore. So I'll just get this loosened off and we'll slide that over the rings. I'm just going to check I've got those rings in a suitable place, which I have. So I'll slide this collar over the rings, like so. And I'm just going to grab some tissue so we can just tighten this up. You can hear that it's got a little ratchet on it as I wind it, so it doesn't click past. And each time I ratchet that, I'm just squeezing those rings tighter. I'm going to see if I can squeeze that just a touch more. There we go. Now I'm going to drop that piston into the bore up until the clamp, and hopefully with some soft knocks of the hammer we'll get that down. I've got all the piston rings past the edge of the bore now. I've got the sleeve out the way, and I'm just going to tap that piston down to the bottom of the bore, and hopefully the big end is wrapped around the crankshaft. I can flip the engine 180 now and we'll have a look, see where that piston's ended up. Having pushed that piston through the full length of the bore, I've now got the big end of the connecting rod around the crankshaft. We can bring the end cap in and drop that over those 2 studs on top of the little shims we've got here to maintain the correct clearance on the crankshaft journal. And like for the bearing shell on the con rod, for the end cap, I'm just going to put a little bit of assembly grease behind the bearing shell. And a bit more assembly grease on the top, and we'll drop that on top of the 2 studs. A nut on each of the studs is next, and then we'll grab a socket just to tighten those by hand. The torque for these nuts in the book is 35 foot-pound. I've got a torque wrench already set correctly, so we'll just wind these down pretty evenly and then hit our torque. We'll have a click on the torque wrench just there. Just double check. And the final step after torquing the nuts, I've got 2 little split pins that go through a hole in the bolt to lock the nut off. So I'll pop those through and then I'll pull the tabs back to lock the nuts from unwinding. So you can see, just as I was describing, the two little split pins through the bolt there, and I'll just bend those back like I have done on cylinder 1, but I'll need 2 hands for that. I'm going to spin the engine 180 again, and we can hopefully see 2 pistons working. All sounds and looks pretty good. We'll leave number 2 at top dead center, ready for number 3. I'm going to crack on with pistons 3 and 4 off camera, as it's probably going to be pretty steady watching for you guys, and you can jump in at the end when we've hopefully got all 4 pistons moving nicely in the engine. The eagle-eyed viewer will notice that I'm wearing a different outfit. I've had a shave, and it's a completely different day, week, or actually month. It's what I like to call sometime later. Basically had an issue with when putting pistons 3 and 4 in, that the engine got tight, so it wasn't turning very freely. Managed to narrow that down to the big end on 3, not having enough clearance. I didn't have the right shims, so had to get some ordered. Went to eBay, managed to find some, but they did have to come from the US. So it took a little bit of time, but having got the shims in, got the right clearances now, we've got a nice free moving engine, which I can show you. So, really happy with that. Glad I can finally end this video. Probably do another video, getting the head on and getting some of the final components on the engine, and then we can probably think about getting it back onto the tractor. And hopefully we'll do that all before harvest, but I've made promises before. Thanks for watching, take it easy, and see you soon.